Klaus. Nope.
That's the first thing that got recorded.
Yeah.
Cloud. No. Back off, Cloud.
Good boy. Sit. Sit. Stay. Good boy.
You comfortable? You alright?
Yeah, just gotta. Alright. Alright, I'm comfortable.
I could tell by that sigh.
Neck, click in the neck.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Now we're good to go.
Cool, man.
Cool.
Thank you for doing this.
No, thanks for having me in my home. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess as I said, like, just a bit of a chat.
Mm-hmm.
I have some things like from the last time we had a chat.
Yeah.
And also just some of the stuff that I mentioned that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
So let's start off by talking about, because last time as you mentioned, it was more of a getting to know you.
Yeah.
So we just we went from A to B to C to...
People just watched us having a mandate, basically.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I had fun though.
I had it. Yeah, it was awesome.
But this time I want to sort of dive deep into some of the specifics that we talked about.
Yeah.
So one of the things that kind of just stuck with me and that made me notice your thing, like once I heard about your journey and stuff like that, was that you worked your way up all the way up to being a program manager at Microsoft. When I was in uni, when I was finishing uni 2012, if someone told me that I was going to be a program manager in in a few years at Microsoft, I would gladly take it. Right? And I was doing software engineering, and I think you did engineering as well.
Yeah.
So what was it that made you go from that point to the point where you're like, nah, that corporate life is not for me. Let me go do my own thing.
Yeah, so I've always wanted to have the freedom to just wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to make a music video today. Or wake up in the next morning and go, I'm going to make a song today. And just have that creative freedom. Because I'm just a creative guy and I'm into too many things. Right?
Okay.
It always frustrated me that I had to spend some time of my day going to do this one specific job, right? Even if it's something that, I didn't hate, right? Like even if it was nice and comfortable. When I was younger, I hated having to go, right, I have to now dedicate my brain and my time to this one thing. Whereas what I wanted to do was whatever I wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I always thought, right, how can I make that happen? How can I avoid the trap of having to have a job as an adult so that I could wake up and do whatever I want? And that's what made me start to look into the world of startups and entrepreneurship and how to gain financial freedom. And I went down many different rabbit holes, like, how do I make money really fast? By selling affiliate program stuff. How do I, make an app that's going to go viral overnight? Your brain sort of starts to, just look at other people achieving success and go, right, maybe I can make the next Flappy Birds, right? So you start to explore all these ideas, and eventually you pick one and you give it a go, right? Because you want to own your own time, and that's what it fundamentally came down to.
Right, yeah. So that's like the shiny toy syndrome, right? You look at someone and they're selling how to become a real estate mogul, and you're like, yeah,
I'll buy that
that's my
course.
jam. Yeah. How to write ebooks and earn 60K while you're chilling in Bali, and you're like, yeah, cool, I'll go do that.
Yeah.
And it's just easy traps to fall into.
Yeah,
but then, and so I was gonna ask you that you said, the words that you used were, I wanted to do whatever I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you're doing it, right? We were just talking about it before.
Yeah.
You have to edit the Startup Weekend podcast.
Yeah.
So in a way, technically, it's not exactly just what you want to do.
No.
Right? So then what's the difference? And I think you touched on it just before. But what's the difference between doing something for Microsoft where you were doing something that wasn't really what you wanted to do and now working for yourself?
Yeah, so as you grow up, you realize that you can't just, being self-employed or having your own business doesn't just automatically mean you can do whatever the hell you want, right? You have to pick one thing and do it really well. And there are going to be times when you have to do things that you don't like doing, right? I love filming and I love being in, with people and being in the environment and making stuff happen, but I'm not as much of a fan as sitting on computer for a long time and editing, right? But you have to make it happen,
right?
So you just have to go, right. Like, yes, it's tedious work, but would you rather be doing anything else right now? Right? Would you rather be doing this with someone else, or would you rather be putting in this effort and time to grow your own thing and your own brand? Right? That's the difference. It really is about how you look at it,
Mm.
right? Because I don't judge the corporate life and talk it down anymore.
Right.
Whereas when I was a kid, I was like when I say kid, I was like mid-20s. I would be like, oh, it's dumb having to work 9 to 5 for someone else, right? But now I'm like, you know what? For some people, that is actually a beautiful life. To be able to work 9 to 5, come home to their family, and focus on their kids. That's a beautiful life, right? If that is what they want. Whereas if someone else wants to have control of their own time so that, because the beauty is I can wake up at 10, right? And 11, right?
Or go to sleep at 10
Or go to sleep at 10, 11. As Arjun says, live that 9 to 5 dream of sleeping during that time.
Oh, that's spot on.
Yeah. So you have the choice of how you do it.
Mm.
And I think maybe that's the difference. That is a difference, is that you still have to bring in the money, you still have to work hard, but you can choose how you do it, and you're accountable to yourself, right? And you got nobody to blame but you if it doesn't work out.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
So the whole like ownership of it all, it's solely on your shoulders.
that's right.
Like no one's sitting on your back telling you what to do,
No,
but no one's sitting on your back telling you what to do.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah, so whether you win or lose, it's all up to you,
It's all up to you.
sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
The the thing that you mentioned about hating on corporate life, it's something that bugs me a lot. Like
Right.
the whole corporate life side
Yeah,
of things.
yeah.
Because I was at a stage I was really into that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way it worked out for me was that, you go to uni.
Yeah.
Like, or I guess you finish school, you go to uni, you do engineering, you get your degree, you get honors or whatever. Then you start working, you get a good job. Then you work your way up to 100K. Then you become a manager. I always thought of myself as someone who didn't really give a shit about like what other people were telling me to do.
Mm-hmm.
But what I realized was that unconsciously, I was just going for like I just felt like I had all this potential, and I had to use it. And what I was doing was I was just using it to work towards just whatever goals were kept in front of me.
Yeah.
So when I was in school, my parents were like, do engineering. And I was like, okay, I have nothing better to do. Okay, I'll go do engineering. When I then started work, it was like, okay, go do this. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I don't really have any particular interest, so I'll go do this. Then it was like, okay, what else am I supposed to do now? So earning 6 figures is like a big thing. So I started going to do that.
Yeah.
As I started hitting those goals down, though, I realized that after each one, I wouldn't feel any different.
Yeah.
And so that's what made me think, like, I don't really give a shit about all of this stuff, but I'm still doing it only because I don't have anything better to do.
Right.
Right? And so that's sort of like what I was, I guess I was curious to know your side of the story. Because in my experience, what's happened is like as we grow up and come through the ranks, so to speak, we keep getting told, like, not even, I guess not even explicitly, like just subliminally, you hear about it on your TV shows that you watch, you hear about it from the people that are around you, you hear about it from people that are 5 years older than you. Everyone's working towards these similar sort of goals.
Yeah.
And it's so easy when you don't know what it is that you want to just get caught up with the herd and just keep going in that direction. And I feel like that problem compounds itself and makes it even worse when you are an achiever. Like if you were like a bum,
Yeah.
it would be different because you'd be like, yeah, okay, this is something that I'm just not going to be able to do.
Yeah.
So let me go find something else to do.
Yeah.
But if you are someone who can just put your mind to things and get them done, this becomes a problem because it's like, okay, now anytime you pick something because everyone else is picking it, you can actually get it done. And as you get it done, you're like, okay, cool, I got this done. Maybe I can get that done as well.
Yeah.
And pretty soon, before you know, you're like 30 and you've been doing all these things that just because other people have been doing them.
Yeah.
And you realize that, holy shit, none of it makes me feel anything. You don't feel like, when you do something that you're really proud of, or when you feel like when you do something that you really enjoyed,
Yeah.
it's just a different sort of like
feeling.
Yeah.
It's something way deeper. It's a deeper sense of satisfaction, right? Like I when I once came back from this film shoot, I felt so good about myself that, I went to Countdown and I bought these ingredients to make this dish that I've never made.
Right.
And usually I'd not really care and have the willpower to do something like that. And I was starving. I just like landed in Auckland because the filming was in Palmerston North, and I just landed and I'm starving.
Right.
Right. And it would have been so easy for me to just go to the drive-thru at Macca's and buy Big Mac. But I was like, you know what? I feel so good, and I have so much zest for life that I'm gonna go make this thing that I've never made and buy the ingredients from Countdown. So it's that deep level of satisfaction you're talking about, where you just feel alive, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you're like, I picked this thing because I wanted to do it. Not because my boss wanted to do it, not because it was good for my company, not because my parents told me to do it, not because, like in the Indian community, it's like there's this whole thing called Lochana kahenge. I don't know if you... Okay, so it's like Hindi, it's Hindi for like, what are people going to say? And
Right.
And that's like a big thing in like...
It's a big thing in brown culture in general. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, even in Sri Lankan culture, it can show up.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you want to go be an actor, or like you want to go be, I don't know, like a stripper or something. Like, what are people going to say? That sort of thing. But it's like...
What are people going to say? What are all the uncles that are showing up at the strip club going to say when they see you?
But it's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's like not worrying about any of that and going for the things that you want.
Yeah.
And for me, that was a pivotal point in my life, because when I was like, okay, none of this is making me feel like, like I'm satisfied. So then the immediate follow-up question is like, okay, then what the fuck do you want to do?
Yeah.
And that's where I was like, okay, I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah.
I actually don't know what I want to do.
And what was that point like for you? When did you realize that? And what was your first thing that you did?
Yeah, so for me, it was really interesting. So I was 25 then, or I was about to turn 25.
Yeah.
So I'd just gotten like a raise, and I was at like, I'd just gotten a raise, and I was like up to like 105K.
Nice.
Yeah, and so when I got that raise, the meeting and the performance review in which I got that raise, I was like, oh man, that's pretty cool. An hour later, I was like sitting at a cafe and I was just drinking my coffee, and I was like, I hate this job. Like, I was like, I can't wait till like, next year when I get another raise. And that was when I realized that like the whole money thing became like, I was basically playing it like a game. It was like, okay, how high can I push the score? But regardless of how high I pushed it, I went from 92 to 105.
Yeah.
What change did it make in my life?
Yeah.
Nothing changed other than like the amount of money that was coming into my bank, which was just lying there. Like I was not very into like traveling and stuff like that. So I wasn't into like buying flashy shit. So, and it was just like, okay, cool. Like just nothing changes for me. So then it was like, okay, so what is it that's going to change something for me? And that for, I think a few months, it put me in like a tailspin. Because when you ask a question, I don't know if that happens to you, but for me, like if there's a problem or if there's a question that I care about and I can't solve it, my mind just starts like spinning its wheels. And you just like, you go into a tailspin, and like, I was just like, everything, like nothing makes sense anymore. I'm not interested in anything. Like, what am I doing, sort of thing. And that was when, I don't know how, but I somehow ended up stumbling across like life coaches. And so that was when I basically like looked up a bunch of life coaches, went and talked to them. And then I picked out this like old white lady, and I was like, yep, that's going to be my coach. Because I was like, everything that I know and everything that I've been like taught and conditioned to growing up is the thing that has led me to this point. So I don't want to, so there was actually, so at the end, I had like two coaches that was like going back and forth between. And one was like an Indian guy who was quite successful.
Right.
And the other was this like, old white lady. Yeah. And I was just like, I could go to the Indian guy, but it's like, I was like, the problem is like my conditioning. I'm pretty sure it's my conditioning. So I want to go to someone who has a completely different background, who has completely different views, and who is just from like a different sort of like planet. And I want to go talk to that person, see how they think, see what they can tell me. And that coaching, I worked with her for about 1.5 years. We would meet once a month, and like that basically like changed my life. So that was a pivotal point for me.
Right, to seek a life coach
and work with her, because with her, first like there was just a lot of anxiety, because I was like, I'm 25 more or less, and I'm like, I don't know what I want to do. I've just spent like my 20 years of my life just like going through school, uni, and all that sort of thing, and now I'm at this point where I've invested all this time, and now I don't want to do that, or I don't think I want to do that. What do I want to do? I don't know the answer to that either, so I'm stuck. So the first thing with her was like, okay, first just calm down. Okay, cool. And then let's figure out like what are the things that you do enjoy, and figure them out at like a value level. So like what are your values? So for me it was things like ownership, fun, that sort of stuff. And so what that meant was I was like, okay, but none of this helps me in any way. And she was like, yeah, just calm down. What this means is that like this is the stuff that you need to find in anything that you decide to invest any further time in. Because if this is not there, you're going to end up feeling the same way in a day or a couple of days time. And that switch, when that happened, it took, obviously, as I said, like I worked with her for like a year and a half. And when I'm describing it, it's like a sentence and a half. So, but that took me a long time to get my head around. And it was like a bit of a process, just chipping away at things and getting to the bottom of it. But once that happened, that sort of like, and so that wasn't the end. That was like, okay, cool. Now I can begin looking for things that actually satisfy that criteria. And so that's sort of like where I went from. So obviously, like we digressed into my side of the things. No, that's fine. Yeah. But yeah, so that was like the point for me. And so that was the reason why I kept, like, even in the Insta Live, I kept asking about like, okay, what was the switch? When did the change happen?
Yeah.
So that's sort of like the thing that I was looking for. Like, was there a pivotal moment like that, or?
Yeah, it was really just a process. But it also came down to, I guess, being a first generation in New Zealand, we don't have the same roots and investments and all that kind of stuff that other people do in a country that they've got generations to back them up, right? So it made me realize that to have that comfort and to get ahead and be fine, I probably should go further than just getting a 9-to-5 job. Right. That was my thinking at the time.
That's good. Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, I need to overachieve and overestimate what I need, rather than just having a job, because I didn't want to be stuck doing a 9-to-5 when I'm 40. Because I saw all these other 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds still working in the industry and still having a job, and I'm like, I really would love to not be working at 40 and just to be doing my own creative thing. So it motivated me to go, right, what if the information is out there, why not? Why not start chewing on the idea of creating your own business, rather than just like working and then going home and then switching off and watching TV.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, why don't I just actually chew on this knowledge? So I started binging audiobooks, right? I started binging podcasts, and it was great because I had a commute to work that would take too long, so I would use that time. And some of it helped, some of it didn't, but I'm glad I chewed on it because it made me select, what do I want to keep, what do I not want to keep.
Right.
Because not every book's going to help you, right? But some books are going to like give you that gem that's going to like stay with you, right? So that's what I did. I just started chewing on it, kept applying the pressure until there was like a tipping point where I'm like, right, I'm out, right?
Right.
And it's crazy how fast things happen straight after that, right?
Yeah. Once you take the red pill, right?
Yeah, once you take the red pill, things happen really fast. And it made me realize, if a human being wants something bad enough, they're way more powerful than they realize, and they can make it happen. They just need to keep the pressure on it and invest time into it. But there's this point where it just kind of just shoots off like a rocket, and it can even scare you at how fast things can move.
Yeah.
Right? As to how quickly your life can change, right? Like that. Because you've spent all this time applying pressure, of learning, and then comes this moment, and it just like goes...
The hockey stick, right?
The hockey stick, yeah. Life has so many exponential things, right? And this was one of them. It was just applying lots of pressure and then suddenly going whoosh, and it can even be scary, because it can also put into question whether you actually wanted this in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Right? It can make you question that, right?
Yeah.
Like, all of a sudden, just being overwhelmed by all the changes that are happening.
Yeah, and it did. I remember leaving the office that day going, okay, so I'm actually gonna do this. And it felt weird. Like, I didn't know how to describe how I felt. It just felt like I had entered a parallel dimension. I had left that dimension that I was in, and now I'm in a different universe, and everything felt different. And it was just bizarre, and it took me some time to get used to it. But it felt like I just left this other Lochana. And
it was,
yeah. And
oh man, I got goosebumps.
But I think the fundamental lesson that I learned from all of this is, what is your bigger picture? Because for some people, the bigger picture is to have a beautiful family. And then in that case, having a 9-to-5 job is actually a fantastic way to get there.
Yep.
Right? And for some people, the bigger picture truly deeply is to create their own empire or to create their own brand or whatever, right? And for that, you do sometimes just need to leave and invest time into yourself. So what is the bigger picture for you? And
Yeah.
sometimes we don't always know what that is. And when you realize you don't know it, like for you, it can put you into a tailspin. And I am like you in that sense, in that if I go into a period where I'm like, wait, who am I don't just think it, I feel it. Like I actually get really depressed, right? And I struggle getting out of bed, and it just really takes a toll on me. And then, you have to like then have a pep talk with yourself and friends and be like, right, what are the steps that I can take to get out of this and to find my purpose again, right? And, like you finding a life coach, right? Because it can really just throw everything out of whack.
Yeah.
Right?
One of the things that you just mentioned was like, I struggled to get out of bed. That was, when I think back to it, that's one of the most like defining memories of that period of time.
Yeah.
I remember like I would wake up in the morning and I would just be like, I wouldn't be physically tired, but I would just be lying there in bed with my eyes open, and I would just be like, I so do not want to like get out of bed and go to work. And for me, that became like a defining, it just became like a defining characteristic of that mindset that I was in at the time, and just like how I felt about whatever it was that I was spending 40 plus hours a week on. And so from my point of view, what it became was like, it wasn't even back then. Yeah, I guess it was the choice between like 9 to 5 or doing my own thing. But later, like now, I realized that it was more like I would even be happy with like a 9 to 5 as long as it was on something that I cared about. Because so I think one of the things that I mentioned, or I don't know if I did mention it, but it was like, so I was like, so I was an engineer, then I kind of like started leading a team, and then I started managing engineers. And when I started managing engineers, one thing that happened was like I started writing statements of work, which was, and what you do in there, like one of the things I realized is that basically like every engineer that was around was just a number. So it's like a resource, and your hourly rate is like 100 and whatever something, and that's all you're worth. And that was how we were treated as well. And that was the thing that became my issue.
Yeah.
Because it's like I would meet people all the time, and I would never meet a person and be like, oh yeah, this person looks like they're worth like 50 or like, worth 75. It was always like I would meet a person and I would be like, holy shit, like this person can do so much.
Yeah.
Like there's so much that they can do. And seeing like, like that sort of like that personality just being like compressed down to a number on paper, that thing just like it just messed with my head so bad. Like it became, for me, it almost became like a philosophical problem of sorts. Like I was like me against the man sort of thing. It wasn't even about just me by myself. I was just like, no, this is just wrong.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And so that's kind of like where it was like, nah, I just can't do this. And so that's where I quit my job and I ended up going contracting. Because with contracting, it was like, yes, I'm still doing 9 to 5, but I get paid for every single hour that I work for. So that's on the practical side of things. And on top of that, I get to move around. So I can see, like, I mean, I was like, I'm sure, like, this isn't the only way that, like, companies do their thing. Like, there must be other companies that are doing things better. And so contracting allowed me a way to, like, jump around and just test the waters with different companies. That's what took me to Sydney. That's what got me to meet, like, a whole bunch of new people. And so I guess if I was to, like, make that more generic, it would be like, okay, so then the next step, once you realize and you're asking the question, what do I want, is to then start experimenting. And, start testing things out. See what, like, the values approach that I mentioned, yeah, but I feel like it's a bit too theoretical. Like, I don't know if it exactly works that way. Like, I could see the values on paper, like ownership and fun and, like, a few other things, but it doesn't click until you experience it somewhere.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to ask you. Like, I've been through similar exercise where I'm like, what are my values?
Yep.
But I was really just writing down words on paper.
Exactly. And that's
right?
exactly how I felt as well.
Yeah. And I was like, ooh, this must be a nice value to have.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You sort of like start to think like, you look at a word and you're like, oh yeah, this would be a good one. Like, oh yeah, I want to be brave. Bring it on.
Leadership.
Yeah.
Honesty.
Exactly.
Bravery.
Integrity.
Yeah.
I like that voice.
Yeah, thank you. Because, like, when did you know you found the right values?
For me,
how did you know?
For me, I think it was like when I was reading those things, I was like, yeah, like these are the things that I've been asking for at work. Like fun is not something I was asking for specific. I was like, oh, I want more fun in my job description. But it was just the kind of like personality that I had. I was like, yeah, fun makes sense.
Yeah.
Ownership, on the other hand, was the thing that I was sort of like asking for.
Yeah.
At work. So I was like, yeah, that makes sense as well. But it wasn't until I started like putting myself out there and looking at other roles, and not even that, when I just quit my job, went contracting and started working at a few. So I, at one point I was doing 5 contracts at the same time. And it was like, when I was working with all of them, I was like, oh shit, like all these companies are different. There's subtle differences, but this one company is the one where I get flexibility of working remotely. I like the people that I work with, they're fun, and they're happy to just give me the whole thing and be like, just get this shit done. We don't care how you do it. So I was like, oh yeah, this kind of matches my kind of thing. So that was a much better way for me to actually realize those values than just, I think having those values there on paper, it does help in terms of like, it gives you like a map of sorts, right?
Yeah.
I can give you a map to get to the Auckland domain, but to be able to experience the domain itself, you have to go there.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that was the sort of like difference. It's about like you do the exercise, but then you got to put it into action. And I think that's where like, that's a big part of coaching for me, basically, to first get that insight, but then to also implement the insight, because those are two different things.
Totally. And did you also find that when you tried out these values, that some of them you were like, nah, you know what? I don't care about this value. Did you learn
Yeah.
that as well?
So as you can tell, like, you know, I keep saying like ownership, fun, and then the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rest are probably the ones that.
So what were
that
the
were
rest?
Like
Yeah.
it's actually in an email that I have got. I
okay.
might look it up later, but
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
for now, like those are the two that I remember.
Fun and ownership.
Yeah, fun and ownership. By the way, it's been like
All right, and we're back.
session has begun.
It's begun.
So that was an interesting chat about the whole thing. I don't know where we were.
We're talking about values that you got rid of, and you said you had
Yes.
an email that you can show us about the values that you're like, you know what? Screw these values.
Yeah,
Yeah, maybe not screw them, but just like they're not.
they're not important enough for me to like take into consideration when I'm sort of like, you know, evaluating things or looking at things.
Yeah.
And maybe that doesn't mean that they're not important at all, but they're not important at the point, like, you know, they're not like a deal breaker.
Yeah.
For me, like ownership and fun are sort of like deal breakers. Like if someone's on my back about some shit I got to do,
Yeah.
and if that's supposed to be like my job,
Yeah.
that's a deal breaker.
Deal
That's
breaker.
gonna be a no. I don't give a shit if you pay me like, I don't know, like whatever, like $500,000. I don't want that,
Yeah.
right? If it's not fun, if it's just like a slog, and because it's a job end of the day, and if it's for someone else, again, I'm not keen.
Yeah.
So those are the tools or like things that I use as filters to essentially filter anything that comes across my way, and I decide if I want to do this or not. Yeah.
Got it. Oh, right. Yeah, because it's when you're a 25-year-old, it's you hear about people talking about values, but you don't have a lot of life experience at that point to really know what they could be,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
But the only thing you can do is just try.
Yeah.
Like pick one and try it.
You play and you
Yeah.
experiment and you go from there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So for you mentioned you have done these exercises before. Is there any are there any sort of like values that you do remember coming across or picking or?
I think I assumed a lot of values, like, oh, I want freedom. I want, like the freedom to do work in my own way, right? I think if I were to go back to a corporate, I think I actually would want to, I think one of my big values would be teamwork,
Right.
right? Because I found that I didn't work as well if someone just said, like, go do this, right? Because the danger of that is if the person that gave you that task haven't really thought it through, right? They haven't really thought of, okay, is the task that I'm giving Lochana actually in line with what the company needs right now? Or am I just giving him something to do?
Just busy work.
Just busy work. Or like, I think whereas if it's more of a teamwork type situation, people can huddle together and really agree on what the direction is.
Sure.
And make sure everyone understands, here's where we're going and here's why it's important to go in this direction. So I value teamwork, even if it doesn't mean that I don't want to go off and do work. It just means when I do, I know that it's in alignment with this greater thing.
Right.
Right. Because it could be so easy for managers to be like, oh, just do that thing, and then you do it. You spend all this time and effort and energy, and you either realize it's not important to the company, or you realize it's actually you can't actually do it. It's actually too much of it's a bigger thing. Like you need multiple people for, or you need more resourcing for. So that's why I really value teamwork. That's one thing.
Right.
And the other thing is honesty. Right. Like the people I work with,
Mm-hmm.
I have to know that I can trust them, and I have to know that they're going to be completely honest. Whether it's hey, I can't actually get this done. This is too big of a task, or I'm struggling, or I'm not actually able to meet this deadline. Which maybe it's a mix of honesty and self-awareness, but honesty is key. It's a huge one for me. So honesty and teamwork, I think, are probably, like you've narrowed it down to two. Those
Two.
probably would be my two as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like any more than two, and you like you struggle to keep it in your mind, and any less than two, and it's just like, oh, it's just one thing. It needs to be more.
Yeah.
But yeah, I completely get like the bit that you mentioned about honesty. Like I personally at work, I try to be, and I like to work with people who I just feel are like dependable.
Yeah.
Like I would rather work with a person who's not like a rock star, but is super dependable.
Yeah.
Because that person, if they really are dependable, they're gonna learn and they're gonna scale up, and their capabilities, and you can see like how they're gonna scale up. Whereas if you have like a rock star, but that's just not dependable at all, it's pointless. Like you can't rely on that person. Then one day they might turn in work that's like worth $1 million. Out of the day, nothing, and your company just goes down.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd much rather work with people that are dependable, and for me that's still part of honesty. It's like they're going to be honest about the work that they can do and can't do. Or if it's a manager, they're going to be honest about the expectations.
Right.
Right?
Of course, yeah.
They're not going to hide that, because I've had situations where either they just didn't think about it and later it bit me in the ass, or they just they almost on purpose didn't go into it just because they wanted to bring me into it and get me to start. You know? And so honesty in terms of expectations and dependability as well. It's really important.
Yeah, that's a big one as well. Just the expectations being set, because that can go 100 different ways. Because you start off and everyone's happy, everyone's excited, and you're like, yeah, we'll hash it out later. And then later never comes. Their later is like different to your later, and their hashing it out is different to yours. You think this is the priority, they think that's the priority, but because you never clarified expectations, it's like that, and it's just it's a shit show. I've been there as well. Yeah, fun times.
Because honesty comes down to also being able to have uncomfortable conversations, right? And not avoiding those. Like you said, not being like, oh, we'll just hash it out later. It's like, no, you get into a room then and there and you lean into it and you get uncomfortable and you figure it out, right? And you don't leave the room until you figured it out.
Yeah, and so that was one of, like, just here in like the NZ work culture, that was one of the things that I noticed is like, because you know how like our Kiwi culture is just like super laid back and chill and stuff like that. And so I just feel like it kind of, in my experience, it kind of ran counter to that bit where you were sort of like, where if something's an issue, you point out and you speak up. It wasn't like that. It was just like, oh, yeah, it's fine. And then all of a sudden, like, no, it's not fine. Now this needs to be get done. Like this needs to be done tomorrow or like next week.
Yeah.
And then like, everyone's sort of like putting in more effort than they needed to, and then you still miss the deadline, and the team's just like, oh fuck, okay, now we got to do more, and it's a downhill, like it's like a slippery slope, and that just doesn't get anywhere. Like, it's just a waste.
It's a waste. Yeah, and it causes bad vibes when you're brought into an environment with a certain expectation, and then it's just completely the opposite of what they told you it was. Like I've had a situation where like I've been told that like literally the the screensaver on the work computer, it'll like, if you leave it alone, it'll flash and say work-life balance, because the company had their like values that were like just kind of like rotating.
Okay.
And one of them was work-life balance. And the biggest irony is looking at the screensaver and it's like 11 o'clock at night and you're still in the office. Right?
Yep.
And I'm sitting here going like, what work-life balance, So that honesty and expectation, that's an example.
Yeah. And that's another reason why I hate all that values talk.
Yeah.
Because of shit like that. Like I've again worked with so many companies where they have these massive restructures, corporates again, massive restructures, they do go through this whole like new branding exercise, and it starts with like the whole team getting together discussing their values, and the first sign of trouble, the first sign of like a missed deadline, it's just like, fuck the values, let's just like get the work done. It is so frustrating. Like you're paying like hundreds of thousands of dollars to like these consultancies and shit like that, you bring them in only to just, it's basically like a parade. Like once it's done, you take that document that they give you might as well just chuck it in the bin, and you just it's BAU, business
Yeah.
as usual.
You know what it is? When you got yourself a life coach and you put the values on paper, but then you moved to phase 2, which is experimenting,
Mm.
it's like they did that first step, but they didn't do the second step.
Mm.
And they weren't honest with themselves, and they didn't go, right, are these values actually sticking to our operations?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? They didn't do the second step.
Yeah. Are these things that just sound great to like the board of investors or advisors or whatever our board is and to the
Yeah.
shareholders? Or are these things that we actually give a shit about
Mm.
and we can deliver on?
Yeah.
That I think is the thing. And so it comes back to, again, another one of the things that you mentioned, self-awareness.
Mm.
I think that's a big one. And for me, working with the coach, that was one of the things that really came to the fore. Because even as I started work and stuff like that, one of the good bits of feedback that I used to get was like, oh yeah, I think like you're really mature, like you're really self-aware, like you know where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are. And because of that, you can work in a way that wherever your weaknesses are, you can ask for help.
Mm.
And where your strengths are, you can really push for it.
Yeah.
And I think like if I had to sort of like come up with like, fundamentals to like live a good life, self-awareness would be one of the top like 3, if
Yeah.
not like the top thing. Because I can give you like a magical like machine, right? But if you don't know how that machine works, for you, it might as well be like a paperweight.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the way I think about self-awareness. Like you are insane, like with your skills and like your abilities and things like that. But then with those, there's also weaknesses and like, like things that you're not quite aware of. If you don't know the full picture, you can never really like realize your full potential.
Yeah.
You're always going to, and for me, that was a big part of the anxiety. It was like, I just know I have the potential. Like growing up, my parents always told me like, look, you're going to do great things. Our parents, like, I think that was like the time period where we grew up. Like everyone would be like, yeah, you're going to do great things, this, that, blah, blah, blah. And so you're conditioned with that.
Mm.
But then the output that you're seeing is just not there.
Mm.
And so it's like, okay, I don't want to waste my potential. How do I not waste my potential? And the first step to that is to be aware of where your strengths and weaknesses are. Because only when you're aware of those things, that's when you can either work towards changing them or improving them or just even being okay with them.
Mm.
But if you don't know it...
Exactly. That's a big one. Being okay with them, right?
Yep.
Because sometimes it is okay just to accept maybe that's not the area that I want to go in. Because the biggest, like, there'll be 2 camps to this advice. One camp would say when you're in a job interview, just like step up and say you can do it and just take the job and do it. And I'm not saying that's wrong because it would have worked out for some people. But I can't do that for some reason.
All right.
Like, I have to, in that interview, be as honest as I can.
Okay.
Right? Like, not to the point of being self-detrimental, right?
Yep.
Like, there are times when you have to, like, be like, you know what? I'm going to put faith in myself here. Right? But not to be so ridiculous and say yes to everything. And I've had situations recently where I've been really proud of myself where I've been, like, on a call with someone who's, like, reached out to me for a job. And they'd be like, we need you to do A, B, and C. And I'd just be like, look, I can do A and B, but I actually really suck at C. Right?
Yeah.
And I didn't get the job, but I'm really happy with that. And they were really happy with that. They were like, thank you for being so honest. It really, like, I think that would have left a good impression. And it's actually a better investment down the line because, New Zealand is small, right? You're going to run into the same people again and again sometimes.
Yep.
If I run into that person again, they're going to know that I'm, like, honest. And if an opportunity does come up that's right for me.
For A and B, then they know who's the person to go to.
And they know they can trust me because I was honest with what I couldn't do. Whereas if I said I can do all these things and then turned up and I couldn't, then I'm just ruining my reputation and breaking trust.
Yep.
Right? So to all the grads out there, like, yes, believe in yourself, but also just be honest. And if they don't hire you because you weren't honest, then that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Right? It's good for you. It's good for them. And maybe it's that they don't like the fact that you were so honest, right? And they don't hire you. And that's a good thing because then that's a misalignment of values.
Exactly. That's not
right?
a place you want to be at.
You don't
anyway.
want to be in that place, right? Because the people that get in there are like the yes people that say, yeah, I can get it done. Yeah, we can make that work. We can make that deadline. You do not want to be in that situation.
I find that really interesting because that's the camp that I belong in.
Right.
So I think it does come down a bit to the personalities because for me, I'm just a lazy person. Like, unless you push, I love being in like the autopilot mode.
Yeah.
unless you push me, or there's an incentive for me to like shift out of the autopilot mode, I will just default back to the autopilot mode.
Yeah.
So for me, saying yes to things allows me to put myself into positions from where I can't back out
Got it.
without without losing, like, you know, as you said, like without like breaking people's trust or thing. So it gives me that additional incentive to actually go ahead and push myself.
Yeah.
Because for me, just pushing myself for the sake of pushing myself is not an incentive enough. And then the second thing I think that it also boils down to is that I don't know if you've heard of like competence confidence.
No.
So this is two types of people. There's people that first work to get the competence and then they get the confidence. And then there's the other type who are confident
Yeah.
that they can get the competence. And then so they basically, like, those are the type of people that like learn on the job. And I feel like I belong in like much more in the second.
Right,
Yeah. Even with my like engineering as well.
Yeah.
Like when I came into the company, I mentioned before, I was number 7 sort of thing. I was a fresh grad and I was at like the client's thing like 2 weeks after starting my new job, and I was telling them how I think they should do things and stuff like that. And, you know, you're young and brash and like you learn things, but and I was never really good at uni. I was never good at studying because it was like without having a place to apply what I was learning, I just couldn't learn. And so I feel like for my type, that's the way to go. The problem with that is that you got to be able to take your hits, because when you approach things in that way, as you rightly put, if you're going to say yes to things, at some point your luck is going to run out, or you're going to meet your match, or you're going to meet something that like is way above your match and you're going to get wrecked. And that's what happened to me.
Right.
2 years into my job. Yeah.
Interesting.
And so again, that was actually one of the another one of the turning points where it was like, okay, like the world's not just a rosy place full of like, you know, unicorns and rainbows sort of thing. Shit does go wrong, and when it goes wrong, you got to be able to pick yourself back up. So if you are in my camp, you have to be able to, you know, be like, what's the word for, like, you have to be able to be strong enough to be able to pick yourself back up when you fall down, because you will fall down a lot if you approach things this way.
Yeah. I think now that I think about it, after hearing you say that, I think maybe the beautiful midpoint of the two camps is still a place of honesty, where, say if we go back to that job interview, for example, that I mentioned, right? I can do A, B, and C, but I think what I remember I said was actually don't like doing C.
Right.
And therefore I'm also bad at it. So I think self-awareness is you saying, okay, I actually don't want to do that as well. But another way to do it is you could be like, look, I'm good at A, B, and C, A and B, but I suck at C, but I will get better at it.
Pick it up. I'll learn it. Yep.
And if you are okay with that, and that is also being honest to the person interviewing you, who can then be like, right, it's a realistic scenario that this person's going to be training in the area of C, but they look keen. They sound motivated, so I'm going to give them the job. But it's starting from that place of honesty, so that when they bring you in, they know, okay, they're going to put in the work to this area, and I'm fine with that. But you know what? Maybe they need someone who's already at a level of competency. And I've been in the trap, and I'm saying this because I've screwed this up. I've said yes to things that I probably shouldn't have, right?
Right.
Where clearly I wasn't ready to do it, right?
Okay.
And you know, I'm not saying that's entirely my fault and that I came in and I lied. It's that in my head, for some reason, I thought I could do it.
Sure. Yeah.
And the person interviewing me didn't dig enough to be like, okay, maybe this person couldn't do it. And I'm like, oh yeah, cool, whatever, right? It was very loosely kind of investigated from both sides. I didn't dig deep enough into myself and go, can I actually do this? And they was like, okay, cool, they did that, and therefore they can do this. So, you know, but if I had started from a place of honesty where I was like, okay, you know what, I actually probably can't do this, but I'm willing to learn, and I'm very keen for this thing. So it's both a question of like, what are you weak at? But it's also a question of what do you want to do?
Yeah, exactly. What are you willing to take on?
Yeah. Do you actually want to do this thing? Forget if you're weak or not. Do you want to do it? Because if you want to do it, it doesn't matter if you're weak at it. You will get good at it.
Yep.
Right? And I don't think I was as self-aware back then.
Yeah.
You know, but now I try and be very careful as to what I say yes to. I'm like, okay, do I like this? Will I get better at it? Yeah.
You learn after you burn, right? That sort of thing.
I like
that.
Okay.
Oh,
did you just make that up?
Because it rhymes. But yeah. Like, I mean, for me, like,
learn after you burn.
Yeah.
Make that a t-shirt.
There's gonna be the next Insta post from my disruptive Kiwi.
You learn after you burn.
Yeah.
Damn, I like it.
That's been the case for me, at least. Like my biggest lessons have also been sort of like my most painful lessons.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just thick-headed and like I just don't learn easily, but yeah, when it hurts, I'm like, okay, I should better pay attention to this, because I don't want to feel this again.
So how do you pick yourself back up? Because you said you need to be strong and be able to get back up again.
Yep.
What's your process of getting back up again? Is it just like, yeah, cool, I'm good, or what's your process for that?
So yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I was thinking about it as I was even saying it, because I was thinking back to the first time it happened. So the first time it happened, basically the CEO had a lot of faith in me, and he put me in this, like he put me in charge of this project, and I was like, yeah, of course I can do it. SharePoint, right? Hate fucking SharePoint now, but back then I was like, yeah, SharePoint, whatever, I'll do it. It's fine. That project bombed, and it was all because of me. I didn't know enough to be able to lead a project. I didn't know enough, like technically, right? So it crashes and burns, and then immediately I see like everyone sort of like just turn their backs to me, or at least that's what it felt like. Maybe that's not how they intended it, but that's what it felt like. And I got given away to, a client, and I was basically like just a resource, a number, an engineer on the team for this new project that the client was launching. I was so gutted that like I failed in the previous project. But more than that, I was mad. I was so mad that they just immediately I went from like being a lead to like just being another engineer on another project.
Wow.
Right? And so for me, a big part of that build up was, or like, building myself back up, was actually the rage that I felt. It was almost kind of like I tapped into that anger. And so on this new project that I was at, the lead on that project made some questionable choices, and he kept butting heads with like the business for like, I think it was a month and a half or maybe even 2 months. And then that lead got fired from the team. And they saw the work that I was doing, and they were like, hey, I'm sure, like, so this is like the architect from like the client side. She was like, she put me in a room and she was like, I'm sure you must have led projects before. Do you want to lead this one? And I was just like, and here you go. This is the classic example of what we're talking about. I was like, yeah, of course. Yeah, all the time. And yeah, of course I'll do this. And I did it. And that became the biggest account for the company for about 1.5 years from that point on.
Got it.
Yeah, like basically like all my favorite engineers from the company, like I brought them on. We did a whole bunch of work for that client. And it was like one of the best projects that I've ever worked on. And that for me was building myself back up, because it was like, because the way I think about it is we learn by example. And we learn by seeing things, right? Rather than being just told something, we learn by seeing it. So what that meant in that particular scenario was that I saw myself take on too much and I saw myself fail. And so self-doubt crept in. Obviously there was anger and stuff as well, but there was self-doubt. I was like, oh, am I good enough? Did I just really overestimate myself? But then with this project, I took on the lead role. I grew the team. So I profited like the company and stuff. And I did something that was way bigger than I thought I could ever undertake and lead and deliver.
Yeah.
And so that was another example that I set for myself. And because that example was much more bigger than like the example of the failure, I was back. After that project, I was like, yeah, I got this. This is easy. And so that was actually when I then decided to go contracting. Because I built up my confidence. I set up examples for myself that like, look, you can do this. Look, you can do this because you did this, you did this, you did that. And so then I was like, yeah, if I've done all that and if I can do all that, then I'm sure I can do contracting as well.
Yeah.
And boom, that was the next step.
Nice. So this is really just the clear example of the difference between the whole confidence over competence thing and the competence over confidence thing.
Yeah. So when I talk about it, I also end up saying like confidence over competence or competence over confidence.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is that it's just like you need competence and you need confidence.
Yeah.
It's just like, which one do you lead with first?
Yeah.
Do you lead with the confidence that, yeah, whatever it is, I know I can do it because I will get the competence.
Yeah.
It's not like I work with like some salespeople and stuff like that, and they're just like really good at just bullshitting, just talking shit, right? Like, yeah, of course we can do this. That's a different level, because that's just like them just being confident.
Yeah.
There's no intention of getting the competence. Someone else is going to do that. But in this case, when you're putting yourself forward, for me, it was like, I am confident that I can learn this in the amount of time that's there.
Yeah.
And I will get it done.
Yeah.
So the competence will come, but it's just going to come later.
Yeah.
Whereas there's the more solid way of doing it, which is like, I know I'm competent, and that's why I have this confidence.
Yeah. Right. And I guess it's about realizing what's the appropriate gap to have between the confidence and competence, where you could say yes. right? And
Right.
how do you
True.
decide
Yeah.
that?
And what's the gap that you're comfortable with?
What's the gap?
'Cause
Yeah.
for me, the gap could be a bit bigger than like the gap that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because in certain areas, I will say confidence over competence is how I operate.
Sure.
But in some other areas, I don't.
Right.
Right? I will be like, you know what? No, the gap's too big.
Mm.
In the area of maybe video, I might say yes to something, versus like another area. Like if my friend reaches out to me tomorrow and says, I need you to code a website, I'll be like, nope.
Yeah. Makes perfect sense as well.
Yeah.
Like for me, that would be the
Yeah.
same case. Depending on, like, if someone was like, "Yo, can you go ahead and like just dive, you know, skydive by yourself?" I would be like, well, no. I would want to do like a whole bunch of dives first, get the competence, because then for me it becomes like, okay, what's the cost of failure? Because the cost of failure there is fatal. Whereas in other situations, the cost of failure is like, so I think that's another another element to that equation. It's like, okay, what is the cost of failure? Are you okay with it? Are you not okay with it?
Yes.
If you can protect the downside, then you know you can go ahead and go for it.
Yeah.
Because worst case, you're gonna feel shit.
Mm.
That's basically what it comes down to when it comes to failure.
Yeah.
Unless it's a fatal failure.
Or it could
There's
cost the company a lot of money.
Yeah.
And people lose jobs and
So that then becomes a fatal failure. Like, you know,
Yeah,
someone's like, you're losing something and like you're sort of like causing irreversible damage.
Yeah.
But let's say if I told you like, hey, can you go down to the street and like there's that girl there, can you go and like ask her to marry you, right?
Yeah.
That's basically something like you go there, chances are you will fail, but it's not gonna be a fatal failure. It's just gonna feel shit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's about it. So it's about being able to like differentiate between those sorts of things. Like, when is the failure going to be fatal? When is it not going to be fatal?
Yeah.
And when it's not fatal, you go and do it. You push in that direction so that the next time you come across something like that you just feel a little bit uncomfortable about, but it's not really like that big of a deal, you can just sort of like charge through it.
So part of it is breaking down what are you actually afraid of here, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Is it in your head? You know, and I do agree that there are certain situations where you do need that extra bit of push. And I think that's where like having a good mentor comes into it sometimes as well. Having someone that goes like, look, here's what, you know, the reality is it's not fatal, right? And here's what you will gain if you try. And if you fail, then you can reverse it and it's fine.
And someone who also has the belief in you, right? Because sometimes you're looking at the mirror and you can't see what another person can see.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if that's happened with you, with like your whole journey, but that's happened with me a lot for sure.
Yeah.
Like there were times where I questioned myself and then someone would be like, yo, you're doing really well. I really like that way. And I'll be like, oh shit. Right. Maybe they are right. Yeah. Maybe I am doing really well.
Right.
And you know, maybe I am actually like good in this area. And I just can't see it at the moment. Because feelings and emotions, like for me at least, they change. Like one day I'll be like, I'm a creative genius.
Yeah.
Like I'll be all Kanye West. And then the next day, I'm just like, oh my God, I can't create a post to save my life.
Yeah.
And so you experience like those, like, you know, ebbs and flows like every day, and you sort of like lose sight of the bigger picture, which someone else can just tell you.
Yeah.
So for me, again, that was another thing with the coach. I keep going back to the coach because like, it's just like she would be like, after we talked for a few months, she was like, look, I know, like I can see you. And based on the way you talk, I can obviously tell that you're competent. And I was like, oh, like I lost like the bit that she said after. I was like, oh, cool. She thinks I'm competent, so I must be competent. So it's like when someone believes in you, you can almost like borrow that faith of theirs, go ahead and do something that you wouldn't do normally if you didn't have that extra faith. And then once it's done, that example is set, you can give that faith back. And then all your faith is built on this new example that you just said.
Right.
That sort of thing.
Borrowed faith.
Borrowed faith. I've never put it in these words, but
Yeah.
I like that idea. Borrowed faith.
Borrowed faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Got.
It's 25.
We're
over 25.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That went fast.
Yeah, man.
Did we just do 25 minutes?
Yeah.
From no way.
Yeah, it was when I touched my watch, actually. Yeah. That's cool. Man.
That's crazy.
We were talking about
What was the one cool catchphrase that we came up with?
burn and learn.
No, so burn. You learn when you burn.
You learn when you burn.
But then borrowed faith.
Borrowed faith.
Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah. And so that.
That's 2 T-shirt ideas we can sell.
Yep. There we go. If only one of us was good at graphic design.
Yep. Cool, man. Yeah. Anyway, so.
Yeah. So for me, that idea has actually played quite a pivotal role in my journey again. Just because, as I mentioned, like 25 was a time when, when I was just like, I was just real lost and stuff like that. And so having someone external who didn't have any vested interest, because my parents were telling me like, yeah, you're going to do great things and stuff like that. But of course, like I'm their son, like they're not going to go say that to my neighbor.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hope they weren't saying it to my neighbor. But yeah, but if another like random person who has no really vested interest, yes, I was paying them money. So maybe that is the vested interest. But, by that point, I had like that amount of like trust in that person to feel like, yeah, okay, if this lady is saying it, then it must be true.
Yeah.
And so once you hear that, then that gives you just a little bit of temporary like boost in confidence that can then allow you to commit to something.
Yeah.
Which once you deliver on that thing, results in a permanent sort of a confidence boost. That's like, yeah, I remember I did that thing. I did that project where I led 15 people after I barely led like 2 people and failed.
Yeah.
And so that tells me that, yeah, I've got what it takes to lead.
No, 100%. And it's really important that the right person believes you as well, I find. Because if anyone just says like, oh, Lochana, you're so great. Like, I have this weird tendency to not trust it.
Right.
Because I'm like, that's just cheap words.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Whereas if it comes from someone that has looked at me, looked at my life, and is a very considerate answer, like they've considered their words carefully, and they're like, here's why I think you'll do well, then I respect it so much more, right? Rather than just like the words being thrown in there for lip service.
Right.
Right. So yeah, someone who knows their stuff, like what you said, right? They know what they're talking about. When they believe in me, it really helps.
What are you thinking of? What past event are you thinking of?
Actually, no past event in particular. Just I'm just remembering just people in general that have given me like,
compliments
or like encouragement. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Like it's really appreciated and it's great. But it's not like I sit there and go like, fuck you. It's more that it doesn't hit me as hard as someone who really sees me and really considers the words that they're saying as not just lip service and not just a throwaway comment, but as like, okay, I see you and I see what your skills are, and I see your weaknesses, and I also know your weaknesses. Like, I even like it when they're aware of it, and then they still give me encouragement, because that means, okay,
because that's legit.
That's legit. It's like, okay, I can be a piece of shit in this area, but you still think I can make it.
Yeah,
and that means a lot.
Yeah.
Right? And so when I try and give someone encouragement, I try my best to consider them and consider their life and consider what they've done and be as honest as possible, because I don't want it to just be a throwaway comment.
Right.
I want it to be like, I think you can take this further, A, if you want to, and B, here's maybe a few things you could do to take it further, but I think you've got what it takes, and I think you should find out where this could go.
Right.
Rather than just like, oh, you're so awesome, or you're so talented, like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean that it's a really interesting point, because for me, one of the reasons to get into coaching was that anytime I would meet a person and I would have a chat with them, it would be like I could see, like I would talk to that person, and as I would like start to get to know them, I would just be like, oh yeah, this person can do so much. Now that feels like an empty sort of like lip service sort of a comment, but there were like specifics that I was noticing in that person. I think that's what made the difference.
Yeah.
And so that reminds me of the time when we were about to do a live, and I reached out to you.
Yeah.
And you were like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to do a live yet.
Yeah.
What was that about?
Well, that was because I was looking at all the other people you had on your live, and I felt that they had gone a little bit further. It was very much a confidence thing, I think.
Right.
Because it's not that I was doubting myself as a filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you give me a camera, I can make good-looking videos. But it's like, do I have enough to talk about of my journey that's going to benefit anybody?
Right.
Right? And the way I had to think about it wasn't just my last year that I could talk about and the lessons I could talk about. I've nearly 32. Of course, there's some stuff that I could talk to.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, this year I'm turning 32.
Oh, nice, man.
So old. And so it made me realize, like, okay, you know what? If I am to help somebody, there are some things that I could say. It was that realization rather than, oh, I've got nothing to talk about because I've only been doing Lochana Media properly for a year.
Right.
Right. Because I've got nothing in that area, I don't know if I can really add as much value of
Sure.
trying my own solo business for a year. I'd say go talk to someone who's been doing it for 5.
Mm.
But that's not what our conversation needed to be, right? So that's kind of like the realization is like, okay, there is something I can do.
Right.
Yeah. But see, it's interesting now that I'm hearing myself. It's not like it's not like I went like, oh no, I can do it. It's like I had to practically thought of a reason why it could work,
Sure.
right?
Mm-mm-mm.
It's like I had to justify it that way. So it's
To
interesting-
yourself.
to myself,
Right.
not just from a belief point of view, but also like actually what can I offer?
Mm.
And here are the specific things. So it's in the same way that I like to give people encouragement is not just like I believe in you, but also like here's specifically where I think you're awesome. You know,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
value you could add. Like I have a friend who she's quite a young woman. I think she's like 20, 21, 20.
Never thought we would be like, yeah, that's pretty young.
Yeah, I know. And she's a fantastic singer, right? But she hasn't been putting out any content as much.
Mhm.
And so she's got this big anxiety of like releasing stuff, right? It's like, oh, what if it's not good enough? What if I'm not good enough? What if people don't like it? And so I had the way that I approached that kind of encouragement was that kind of breakdown of like, okay, do you want to go down this path, right? If you don't, that's completely fine,
Mm.
right? And the answer was she doesn't know. I'm like, okay, cool. So what can we do to find out?
Yep.
Right? And then I gave her a bit of encouragement. I said, like, I think you should find out because I think music is always going to be part of your life. I think you enjoy it. I think you just need to find out whether this is something you want to do. And you just need to get that rush of releasing something and find out what it's like to,
Feel that.
feel that, right?
Yeah.
So I said, we're going to release 10 videos and then you're going to decide,
Mm.
right? But then I was also like, I think you should because the last time I saw you perform, like, I'm not just giving this compliment for the sake of lip service, but I felt the energy, It's like they really lit up when they performed
Mm.
and I really enjoyed watching it,
Right.
right? So that's the difference is it's not just like, oh, you're so great. It's like, no, here's specifically why you're really good.
Mm.
And here's the value that you gave to so many people during that performance. And so it's kind of like the way that I like to think about things and the way that I like to think about encouragement and either whether I'm encouraging someone or they're trying to encourage me. So I like to get real specific.
No, that makes a lot of sense as well because my own personal experience of being on video was exactly the same. So the 10 thing that you mentioned, it was exactly that. So I think in October last year is when Sean, I think just start of October, Sean was like, hey man, I think you should do videos. And I was like, nah, that's not my jam. I just post quotes and I like to write stuff and all that. And then I started working with this like other coach and she was like, okay, cool. You're going to do like a 30-day video challenge. And I was like, what? 30-day video challenge?
Right.
And I was like, okay, but then what do I have got to lose? Like, maybe a bit of face. Maybe people laugh at me. But it's just my Facebook. Like, it's people that know me anyway.
Yeah.
So I'll just post 30 days of videos. Regardless of how crap or how well it goes, I'll just keep posting. I'll post for 30 days. And after that, I'll decide if I want to do more or not.
Yeah.
And you just go ahead and do it. And I went there and did it. And like within the first, like, I think 3 or 4 days, I was like, yeah, I like this. I want to do more of this.
Yeah.
Then I got to like the halfway mark around like day 15 and I was like, oh my God, I'm running out of ideas. Oh my God, I'm panicking, blah, blah, blah. I never want to do this again. And then by the end, I was like, so glad I went on this journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really wanted to do this.
Yeah.
And I really did. And I want to do more of it. And so it kind of like you take yourself through that journey. And by the end, whether you want to do it or not.
That's right. But it's so helpful to have someone give you that roadmap,
Yeah.
Be like, not just roadmap, but like acknowledge your mental state and be like, it's fine. This is normal for you to feel really shit right now. Keep going. It's normal for you to not know, but I think here's the next steps you should keep going with, right? So I love receiving that kind of encouragement, not just like you can do it, but here's a practical way to find out whether this is for you or not.
Exactly. And instead of like just saying it like randomly, like here's the next step that you can do. And, just sort of like specific feedback, right?
Yeah. And I love it when they're honest with me as well. I'm like, okay, here's what didn't work. Like what I don't like is friends that just tell me it was good because they're my friends. Yeah. And I appreciate it. But then I also want like, okay, where can I improve? What can I do better? Right? Where did you feel it didn't go quite well? And even if you can't articulate it, that's fine. Just tell me where. and I can have a think about it.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, that's the stuff that's gonna make a tangible difference to who you are, what you do,
Yeah.
and where you end up going. Right?
100%.
Compliments. I can tell you, I can give you an honest compliment right now
Oh, thank
about how, like, this. I haven't given the compliment yet, but like how this setup is great, or like I saw your startup weekend, like podcast that you edited, and I gave you some feedback about it. I was like, yeah, like, man, this is really cool, the hum and that's great, but it doesn't take you any further.
Mm-hmm.
But if I was to tell you that, like, I don't know enough to actually tell you anything, but let's say if I gave you some specific bit of feedback that, like, oh, maybe you should have used 3 cameras, and that's something that you can work on, and that's something that's going to make a tangible difference to the output that you have, like, going forward.
Yeah.
And so that's another place where I see, like, constructive criticism as a lot better compared to, like, just compliments, or
Yeah.
people like giving you fake compliments because they don't want to hurt your feelings. Like, the intention is fine,
Yeah.
but the end result of it is, like, useless.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We won't be getting compliments after this.
Yeah, no one's gonna be. Yeah, they're gonna be too scared to give me a compliment. Like, oh no, Locha's gonna want me to elaborate.
So how do you feel on, like, video after the live? Like, what did anything change, or how did you? Because we kind of talked about that a little bit just before off camera.
Yeah.
But once you did the live and stuff like that, and you thought about it, how did you feel? Because you at the start, before we did the live, so I guess to put things into context, before we did the live, you didn't think that, like, you were at a place where you were worth a live, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then afterwards, how did you feel?
I felt really good, and I've just got to say, like, I really was, really appreciated that you did, do it, and you,
Cheers, man.
because, it felt satisfying at the end, because it wasn't just that we did the live. It's that I did prep work for it, and I thought about my stories, and I'd made that spreadsheet, and I got on the call with a phone call with Tarannum, and like
Worked through it and, like,
worked through it and
for
prepped for it, and then at the end to be like, you know what, I prepared, we did it. There was a sense of achievement, right? So I feel like the lesson I took away from that is, like, if you put work into it, and you got through it, for better or for worse, you're gonna feel good because you worked for it.
Yep.
You worked for it, and it's gonna feel good. And maybe when it goes, if it had gone shit, even then, at least you can walk away with saying, like, you cared enough to try.
Yep. Exactly.
Right?
And it's a challenge that you picked, right? Like, it wasn't like someone. Man, I really hate corporate. I'm going back into that side. But basically, it wasn't like something that someone ordered you to do.
That's right.
It was like you were like, okay, I'm going to step up to
Yeah.
the plate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take a swing. Even if I miss, it was my choice.
That's right.
Right. And
Yeah.
and for me, like, that makes a world of difference.
Yeah. Like, you didn't force me to do it. You gave me that encouragement. That was great. But no one was putting a gun to my head and said, you have to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So I made the choice after that to go, like, right, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to prepare for it. And it felt really satisfying to have worked for it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what are you going to do with all, like, the stories that you've collected now?
I think what I realized is it's a lifelong process of collecting stories, right? And crafting them. So I'd be lying if I said I'm going to work at it every day. I'm going to wake up and write a story and work on it. It's not going to happen, right? But every once in a while, when an opportunity like this comes up, I'm going to revisit my stories and be like, what are the stories that I have, and how can I tell them? The advice that podcast gave me, though, that I listened to, was you should be doing it out of charm, was that you should be doing it in your head or with people every day. Like, you don't just practice it on your own. You actually do it every day, the art of storytelling. So really, like, I just need to remind myself to consciously be practicing storytelling every day, and even if it scares me, because it does. It scares me because it's like, are people going to find me boring? Are people going to find what I'm saying really boring right now? Are they going to interrupt me? It can be very painful, right, to a sensitive soul.
For sure. Yeah.
If you treat it as just practice, and you will get better at it.
And so for, I guess, like, people that are going to be watching this, and as, like, a review, what was the actual, like, breakdown for how to tell a story?
Oh, sure, yeah. And I'm making this up right now, and this, like, because people like have different names for these structures. Some people call it the hero's journey. Some people call it, I don't know. But this one, and the one that I like to think of it is set the scene, right? Where were you, right? So I'm sitting at home. And I'll go over a story that I told you just before for the benefit of the audience.
Yes,
It's
please.
like, okay, the first step is the background, right? It's like, okay, so I'm just sitting here chilling with, my dog, right? I'm just, having a good time, giving him a head scratch. And then all of a sudden, my calendar notification pops up, right? And it says, meeting in 15 minutes,
So that's the prep.
right? So that's, yeah. So first background and now the prep. It's
Mm.
like, okay, now you know what's at stake, right? It's like I, as the character, have something I need to achieve, right? I have a goal, right? Because every good character should have a goal,
Mm.
right? But 15 minutes, I need to get to the city. How am I possibly going to do that from where I am?
Yep.
Now I've got an obstacle, right? Character has a goal. Now there's an obstacle, right? So I'm freaking out. I get in my car. My heart's pounding. I'm sweating. I'm like, looking at that needle hitting like the speed limit going, do I keep pushing this? But if I don't, I might get fired, right? But then there's another needle right next to it that says E. My fuel's about to run out. I'm like, oh no. Do I risk this? Do I go to the petrol station or do I just like risk it? So I'm like, you know what, screw it. I'm gonna risk it. So I get on the motorway. And I'm going and it's like nearing that time of the meeting, right? And then out of the blue comes this text message. It's like, here's the link for the Zoom meeting. And I'm like, oh, it's an online meeting. I didn't have to get out of the house, right? So relieved, I pull over into the side and then I take the call. And the lesson there is check your calendar invites properly, right?
Or it could be an advertisement for Zoom.
Or it could be yeah,
Maybe we can get them to sponsor this
sponsored by
podcast.
Zoom. This podcast was sponsored by Zoom. So really, yeah. So background prep, then there's like some sort of character and an obstacle, and then there's the journey of the character trying to achieve what they want to achieve, right? And then there's obstacles. My petrol's about to run out, all right? And then there's the character coming home and discovering something or finding themselves or coming back home. And then you got to assess how has the character changed? What have they learned? How have they grown? And in this case, I didn't really come home, like literally, but the story concluded in me realizing, oh, it's just an online meeting. And the lesson there is just check your invites properly, right? And that's how I've changed as a character. As I've grown, I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm going to make sure that, okay, I'm going to check the invite and, not make that dumb mistake. So that's kind of like a basic story structure.
Yep. And then you talked about sort of like going even like, to an advanced level where then it's about like how you actually tell the story, the words you use, like, you can sort of like tell that whole story in like one sentence, more or less, or you can add details like, I was sitting there and I was scratching my dog's head, just relaxing, enjoying the, sun, or I don't know, like Monday afternoon or whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's like, I was driving and like the needle was just like, at the speed limit. Like it allows you to put the listener in, and sort of like allows them to put themselves into your shoes and be able to almost like feel and stimulate in their brains what you would have been feeling during that story sort of thing.
Exactly. And human beings, we think we're actually smart, but fundamentally information goes into our head and it goes through a really primitive part of my brain that really only thinks about, I'm hungry, I need to run away from that predator, I need to mate. That's kind of how we filter information, is we have a very primitive brain and it goes through that first. And then it goes into our,
prefrontal cortex, where we're like
right?
actually like rational thinking and like logical thinking, all that sort of comes to play.
Exactly. But fundamentally, we're still that reptilian brain, right? And so you got to appeal to that first. And when I mention things like, my palms are sweaty, mom spaghetti, it's giving the audience tangible things that they can hold on to versus ideas.
Yep.
Ideas are just, you can't touch an idea, but you can think about.
You remember when you last felt your sweaty palms, and
exactly.
You know how you felt.
Yeah, and everyone's been there where they like running late to a meeting, like nearly everyone, right? Everyone like me who's, So the lesson there is like get tangible. And it's the same thing that I learned in songwriting, right?
Okay, yeah.
When you're writing a song, and especially in country music, this is true. I can't really tell you, oh, like I broke up and I'm sad and I miss her, right? Because does that really make you feel anything? Like, does it really show you something that tells you that I'm sad, but I don't show you?
Right.
right? But if I say picture perfect memories scattered all around the floor, right? It's not my lyric, by the way. That's a song.
Oh man, I was gonna be like,
Now that you've got an image in your head, and I don't have to tell you that I'm sad, but you're seeing it, right? It's like it's there. It's written in, it's, you don't have to like deduce it. And suddenly you can then pour your own emotions and your own feelings into it, right? It goes even more advanced than that if you think of it from a hormonal level, right? And this is, again, not my material, out of chant, but there's different types of hormones in our body, right? There's testosterone, right? There's cortisol, which is stress. There's serotonin, which is, I think, a feeling of significance and happiness. There's dopamine, which is that instant hit of gratification, right? There's endorphins, which I think is like laughter. Serotonin might have been the bonding one. I can't remember, but I'm really bad at remembering them. But when I say, like, I'm sitting here with my dog and I'm patting him on the head, you're thinking, oh, like, that's really sweet. Like that, I can, that's warm, right? I can feel empathy for this character, right? He's. And then when I say, like, oh no, I'm running out of petrol, right? Like,
you feel the desperation.
Yeah, but it's also funny, right? It's like, dumbass, right? Didn't fill his petrol, right? Like, so, that's endorphins, right? Now, had it been like a situation where I did tell you I somehow made it in 15 minutes, that's testosterone. That's like achievement. That's significance. It's like a hero story. Well, in the case, a really dumb story of like speeding, right? So if you think of it as that, you can break your stories down into different types of, like, emotions. Like, okay,
Right.
this is a hero story. This is a funny, lighthearted story that's going to make you connect with me, right? And make you connect with me as a human being. So you throw out your rational brain and you actually feel empathy for me, which can be really great in a meeting if you're trying to pitch an idea and you appeal to their emotions, right? Versus like, like a, I don't know, what's another, yeah. So the point is, you get what I'm saying, right? Like different hormones have different, purposes.
That's really cool. Because it's almost like, I mean, end of the day, we're all slaves to our own biology.
Totally.
And so what you're doing and what you just described is a way of tapping into like that person's biology.
Yeah.
So by by making your story funny, you're like you're making them you're like, there's a rush of endorphins, which makes them feel good, which primes them up to be in like a good decision-making frame of mind, let's say. So if you're making a pitch, if you're being funny, then that's it's kind of like you're almost breaking it down to almost like section by section level, where you're like, okay, I want this person to feel like X, Y, Z, so I'm gonna I need this in my, like, you can almost break it down to a formula of sorts.
Yeah, and marketers do this all the time.
Right. Yeah.
This is their job, is to associate buying this car means you're gonna get that girl, right? It's like, buy this thing and your friends are gonna love you, or you're gonna be the hero, right, of everyone. So yes, it can be exploited, but you can use it to your advantage as well if your intentions, I suppose, are good, right? Like, say if you want to convince someone to invest in an idea that is going to be good for the world, right? Like a like a new power, like a solar power plant or something like that. Then you can use these ideas to appeal to their better nature, right? And then you bring in the numbers, right? The numbers are going to come later, right? Like, or if the numbers didn't work out, you wouldn't even be in that room in the first place.
Yep.
Right? So you appeal to their humanity first, right? And then you bring in the numbers later.
Right. So I recently read the book by the guy who was the main guy in like Wolf of Wall Street.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
But the actual guy, not Leonardo DiCaprio.
Not Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, and he talks about the fact how every purchase decision that we make, or almost every, that's not like a regular purchasing decision, it is actually first an emotional decision. And then the number and the logic is what we just use to justify it to ourselves. So when you go out and you buy a Tesla, you're not buying it because like, oh yeah, like, it's electric and so like it saves the environment. You're buying it because it looks sexy, and it can go to like 0 to 100 in like, I don't know, like something ridiculous like 3 seconds or something like that. And then you use the fact that, oh yeah, it doesn't cost so much, it's good for the environment, it's safer, or whatever is the case, to justify it to yourself and to, like, let's say your significant other or people around you. They're like, oh yeah, that's why I'm buying the car.
Yeah.
But really it's because you just at a visceral level, like you look at that car and it does something to you.
Totally. And that was a smart move by Elon, right? To make this a luxury car that you want.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Instead of like a freaking like those cars that look like cubes that are supposed to be like electric
Who's
cars.
gonna buy that?
Like,
To
looks like an ugly toy car.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas here, you can be the one with the Tesla that's a cool car, and be a hero for everyone because now you're saving the environment, right? So you're cool.
Nice, man. So our time's up.
Wow.
And man, it's been a great chat.
Definitely. That's been awesome.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for doing it as well. Thank you for being in my home and coming. And
It's a nice place.
Thank you.
Where's class at?
Class is over there.
Oh shit. Keeps like confusing us. But yeah, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And
Man.
hopefully we'll do more of this.
Definitely. Boom. Cue it, outro music.
Nice, man.
Oh,
That was-
all right. That was good, man. That flowed. It didn't feel like an hour and a half.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's why like